All right, everyone, we're going to get started. Thank you so much for joining the CivicSpark Climate Partner orientation this morning, this afternoon, I should say. Hopefully we can get through a lot of these slides pretty quickly. We have an hour set aside today, hoping to leave plenty of time at the end of our presentation to answer any questions that you have. But again, my name is Kristen Wraith, and I'm the Senior Project Manager at the Local Government Commission. I manage both the CivicSpark Climate and Water projects here at LGC, and today obviously we'll be talking about the climate program. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please just chat them in through the question bar at the side of your screen. There will be a couple of points in the presentation where I'll be stopping to answer any questions that you have, but I'll definitely take a stop and answer any questions that come up throughout the webinar. And again, a lot of these things are going to be just a refresher for you. We've worked together for some of you with multiple years, so try to keep this pretty quick, cover some of the differences and new aspects of the program this year, and then get you all ready to start working with your fellows in 1 month. So quickly looking at the agenda for the call today, we're going to go over the background of the program, keep that very high level, talk about some CivicSpark and AmeriCorps policies and procedures. We have to talk through these every year, so just give you an update and a reminder on those. Talk about the roles and responsibilities of a project partner and some of the next steps for the next few weeks and then the first few months of service. Talk about the support that CivicSpark project partners will receive from the program, and then we'll wrap up with any other next steps and questions that you have. So talking about the background of the program, so obviously, as you know, CivicSpark's an AmeriCorps program, and we're a Governor's Initiative AmeriCorps program. What this means is every governor gets to select a program that they feel most aligns with their administration's priorities, and for CivicSpark, that means that both the climate and our water program were selected. It's a great opportunity for us to connect closely with the Governor's Office of Planning and Research. And something that I want to really call out for all of you as project partners is it's a great opportunity for you to be connected to the state level and get any other support, maybe technical information, anything else that you might need that'll be helpful for you from the state level. So encourage you to reach out to us throughout the year if you think that there might be any opportunities for connection, nexus, if there's any information that you need. We'd be more than happy to connect you to any folks that we work with at OPR, and they really want to get to know the CivicSpark fellows and partners well. Also, so definitely take advantage of that opportunity as well. And CivicSpark, as you know, managed by the Local Government Commission. We provide the program infrastructure, do all the recruitment and hiring of fellows, and then really we'll talk through today some of the performance goals that we have as a program, pretty similar to what they've been in the past, but just want to give you a little bit more information about the information that we're tracking and reporting on an annual basis. So some of the other folks that we'll be working with throughout the year, you might interface with them, you might not, but as an AmeriCorps program, we're partially sponsored by the Corporation for National and Community Service. That's the federal agency that administers all AmeriCorps programs. I'm happy to answer any questions that folks have about that federal connection. I know we get questions about that from time to time, so more than happy to talk about that if there's any questions that come up. But within California, all AmeriCorps programs are administered by California Volunteers, which is a state agency that does all national service programs. So a lot of the policies and procedures that we'll talk about today, not created by CivicSpark, but actually created by CNCS or California Volunteers, and we are just passing that along to you. So I'll try to make that distinction wherever possible. Trying to give you a bit of a sense of the policies that we just need to adhere to as a program, and then hopefully we'll be working with you on as well this year. So the structure of CivicSpark, we are a little bit bigger than we were last year. We still have 2 theme tracks, the Climate Fellowship and the Water Fellowship. The Climate Fellowship and the Water Fellowship. The climate side has grown from 48 to 50 fellows, so we're now at 70. And our climate and water fellows are going to be working a little bit more closely together this year than they have in the past. So if you've had climate fellows in the past, had water fellows. They're going to be working together, going through trainings and all their regional meetings from the start of the service year, which is new this year. So across the board, we're going to be placing all CivicSpark fellows in teams of anywhere from 3 to at this point, almost 25. The Bay Area and LA are definitely large this year. And the fellows in these regions are going to be working really closely together on training, on different volunteer engagement projects and other regional activities that they'll be doing. So if you have any questions about the different water projects, I know that's an aspect of the program that not as many of you have interacted with in the past. I'd be more than happy to talk about that as well. One of the differences with the CivicSpark Water program is that fellows are all embedded in teams of 2 in local and regional water agencies, whereas most of our climate fellows are placed individually within their program site. But otherwise, lots of similarities between the 2 programs. And on the right, you'll see a spread of where we've been in the past couple of years. So now I'm going to dive into this really messy program diagram. I want to give you a sense of, at a more granular level, how the programs run and what our structure is. So at the top, obviously, CivicSpark is a program of the Local Government Commission. I work on both the climate and water tracks of the program, and as well as KIF and our 2 project coordinators, Rachel and Ariadna. But for the purpose of the webinar today, want to look at the climate program structure. Again, very similar to what it was last year. Most of you will not have any sort of change in who you're working with on a day-to-day basis, but just want to walk through this quickly. So within the climate track, our 50 fellows and all of our project partners are broken up between 2 regions. We have our large region area, which I'm the staff point for, and our small region area, which Julia Kim is the staff point for. And the staff leads internally are called area leads. We're secondary contacts if your regional coordinator is out of the office, or if you have any larger programmatic questions that your regional coordinator is not able to answer, we'll get looped into the discussion. But mostly we'll be doing site visits throughout the year. You'll see us at least once a year in your project site likely. And obviously we're there for any questions that you have throughout the service year. But beyond that, you'll see we have our regions up on the screen, and we have in the large regions full-time staff members who are there. They're called associate regional coordinators. So in the Bay Area, that's Bree Swenson. In the greater LA region, that's Mackenzie Bolger. And in the inland region, we are just finalizing our hiring for that position now, so very exciting. And the inland region will encompass the Sacramento, Sierra Nevada, and San Joaquin Valley regions. And in our small regions, our regional coordinators are part-time. They're embedded in the communities. They're working very closely with the fellows in the regions. And in the North Coast, that's Lexi Fisher. And in the Central Coast, that's Anna Olson. So both of them are returning to the program. Actually, all of our regional coordinators have familiarity with the program, have been working with us for a few years. So really excited to have them on board. And we'll talk a little bit at the end of the webinar today about what resources they can provide to you all as project partners. So I want to give you a quick overview of the impact that CivicSpark's made in the last few years. We're just finishing up our 3rd program year right now, about to kick off our 4th. So very soon we'll be able to update this to show the first 3 years of service. But in the first 2 years alone, we had over 130 hours of service to more than 100 public agencies and 80 projects. So this year, we're going to have 100,000 hours alone, which is really exciting. But you'll see up on the screen a range of the different impacts that we have as a program. It's hard to quantify our impact in one metric just because you all have projects that are really diverse and touching on so many different issues. But I want to give you a sense of the scale of the work that we're doing throughout the state and some of the different areas that we're touching on. So even if you're working on a project in one sector, there are going to be fellows and project partners around the state touching on pretty much every corner of the climate field. So if you're ever wanting to know best practices, talk to somebody who's working on a particular issue, really encourage you to reach out to your regional coordinator. We want you to use this network to your advantage throughout the service year and really take advantage of the connections that exist. So we'll talk about what that could look like as well more in the interview, but just wanted to give you this overview now. So as I mentioned, we are an AmeriCorps program. think most of the time our partners do not interface with the AmeriCorps side of the program. So want to make sure you know what AmeriCorps is, what it does, and how that impacts you as a project partner. So just as, again, a reminder, AmeriCorps federal program with service as a solution. It's been around since 1994. It started with 20,000 members a year, and it's currently at about 80,000 members a year. It could go up to 250,000, but we're not quite there yet. And there are, AmeriCorps just graduated their 1 millionth alum last year. So it's a huge network, but it's also a federal program. So there's a lot of bureaucracy that comes with that. And we'll talk through what some of those policies and procedures look like. So the goals of AmeriCorps are pretty straightforward. So getting things done, strengthening communities, and sorry that got cut off there on my slide, and member development. So all AmeriCorps programs, no matter what their focus may be, and those are the three driving principles that AmeriCorps members are going to be working on. And that translates to CivicSpark goals, which very directly align with that. We have service projects, so conducting specific research, planning, and implementation projects within the community, doing volunteer recruitment and engagement to make sure that fellows are building on or improving the local volunteer services that you all have within your communities, and growing professionally, so professional development, dedicated trainings, and allowing the fellows to work towards any specific professional development goals that they outline at the start of the year. And these translate to our performance measures. So when you're all working with your beneficiaries to complete the pre and post service capacity assessments, which I know a lot of you are wrapping up right now, that's how that connects to our performance measures. We're collecting data on each one of these three categories and reporting them to California volunteers and CNCS every year. So it's really important that our fellows are achieving the goals of their capacity building projects, doing volunteer outreach in the community, and also really taking the time to dedicate themselves to their own professional growth. And that's an area that I want to talk about today. We have some new expectations this year for project partners and helping out the fellows with this professional development, and want to make sure we spend some time talking about what that looks like. So getting back to AmeriCorps, as I mentioned, definitely have a lot of regulations that we're following as a result of this federal funding, which a lot of you are very familiar with. So I'm going to break that up between four categories. The first is just minimum requirements and hours served. We'll talk about the breakdown of hours. We do not set these categories. These are set by AmeriCorps, but want to make sure you are comfortable with them and know what they are. There are a number of prohibited activities that fellows are not allowed to engage in. We're required to run them by you every single year, just so that you don't forget them because they're so important. So we'll talk through those. Looking at the types of activities that fellows are allowed to log time for, so what awarded hours or unawarded hours, and then just the basic discipline and grievance policies. Hopefully that won't be an issue at all, but we'll talk about it just in case. So the basic restrictions, AmeriCorps is a domestic program, so all candidates need to be U.S. citizens or lawful permanent residents. They need to be at least 17 years old, but obviously for CivicSpark, we have the additional qualification that fellows need to have a college degree, and they all have to have criminal history background checks. The background check piece, it gets bolded and underlined for a reason. Fellows cannot serve any hours or receive their stipend until they have done their background checks and we have received the results. So it's one of the most important parts of the service year because fellows cannot start working until they have all their checks passed. So if you have any other background checks that need to be completed for your agency, make sure you're getting your fellows on those ASAP. We really want to make sure there aren't any hangups at all in this background check process. So just to show you the background checks again that we're doing, it's possible that this might fulfill all the requirements of your own HR policies. We obviously, all of our authors are contingent on passing these background checks. So if you have any questions about the background checks that we do and how this might apply to your own HR process, just let me know. But at a high level, fellows are doing an FBI and California live scan. If they're from out of state, we also do background checks for their state of residence. And we do National Sex Offender Public Registry checks on all of the fellows as well. So again, I'll just say you have to do your own background check for your agency. Let your fellow know ASAP so that they can get that done so there aren't any hangups when they get started. So the time expectations, service year is earlier this year. As some of you have experienced, you have fellows who are leaving the program a little bit early to go to grad school. We're hoping an earlier start date this year is going to help that, so that doesn't need to happen in the future. So fellows this year are going to start at orientation, which is September 10th through the 14th. And then the last date of their service year is going to be August 10th, 2018. So we expect all of our fellows to serve full-time through that date, and they need to serve at least 1,700 hours by the end of the service year in order to complete their term of service. We've set up the service year so that comes out to about 40 hours a week. As I'll show you on the next slide, and as you know, not all of that is service projects for your agency. There's a mix of program activities and other volunteer activities that the fellows are going to be doing, but at least 80% of their service or their hours relate to service as opposed to training. So how that breaks down, we say at least 1,300 hours are dedicated to project service. That typically turns out closer to 1,350 to 1,400 hours, but you're guaranteed at least 1,300 by your contract. And then beyond that, the other 400 hours are broken up by a number of categories. Volunteer engagement is about 150 hours of service. So as we'll talk about, volunteer engagement doesn't necessarily need to relate to the project work. Some of your fellows may choose to do their 150 hours with your agency directly on a project that you're working on, but not all fellows will do that. And then a lot of time is spent training. Both the fellows go to an orientation, a mid-year retreat, and then there are 2 trainings a month they'll be participating in. So your fellows will likely be in your office for most of those activities, but not all of them. So we expect all the fellows to keep you updated, share a calendar, make sure you know when they have trainings and other things that are going to either pull them out of the office or, pull them out of whatever work you might be doing for a few hours or a few days for some of the bigger activities. But if you ever have any questions, reach out to your regional coordinator. They have the complete training schedule for the year, and we'll be sharing as much information with you as possible. But we want to make sure that you're just in the loop at all times on what your fellow is doing and what's occupying their time. And then I also just want to mention the benefits of the program. So as AmeriCorps members, there's a set of benefits that all fellows will be getting. And also just want to note that there are a lot of restrictions with these benefits. Their living allowance is $16,000 spread out in biweekly paychecks over 11 months. So that is not a lot of money to live on, especially in our urban regions in the state. There's a plus there because we're going to be doing a slight cost of living adjustment in some of our more expensive regions. So all fellows will likely get a slight bump, but in our urban areas, that might be as much as $1,000 to $2,000, but still not a lot of money that they're going to be getting. They're really giving up a lot to take part in this experience. They will get a Siegel Education Award if they complete their hours requirements and finish out the term of service, and that can either be used to pay off existing student loans or continue their education. And we'll be providing health insurance, childcare if necessary, and then loan forbearance and repayment of interest accrual on their student loans for the term of service. So these are the set benefits that all fellows will be getting. I encourage you, if there are any benefits that your agency provides staff members or volunteers, see if there's any way to get your fellow access to that at the beginning of the year. We've heard every year fellows will find out 7 or 8 months into service that they could have been qualifying for a transit benefit. And it's really hard to hear that when you've been traveling and making that work for a couple of months already. So if there's anything at all that you think your fellow might be eligible for as part of your agency, definitely let them know as soon as possible. And we really appreciate anything that you can set up as an additional benefit for your fellow. So transitioning to a less fun topic, prohibited activities. As I mentioned, we have to go through them. Hopefully you're all familiar with these, but just want to remind you all. So prohibited activities are things that fellows cannot do under any circumstances throughout the term of service. And we always spend some time talking about these because a lot of these topics are things that you do and staff members do in your agency as part of their day-to-day work. So some of the ones that come up the most, usually several times a year, are the first few bullets in the examples below. So attempting to influence legislation and advocacy. An example of this is you can't have a fellow go to a city council meeting or board of supervisors meeting and go up, give a staff report, and suggest that the council vote a certain way on a piece of legislation. They can share facts and figures, but they cannot provide recommendations as a fellow. They also cannot hand out flyers for ballot measures or trying to influence anybody's decision on something that your agency is working on. If you have any questions about specifics, just chat them in through the question bar. We've had some hypotheticals come through the last few webinars. So if you're not sure, just let me know. Hopefully it won't be an issue, but just want to remind you. So also, fellows can't engage in any partisan political activities or provide any direct benefit to for-profit labor unions or any partisan political organizations. So that is, I'll leave it at that for prohibited activities. Obviously, fellows can engage in these activities on their own time, but not while recording any hours for CivicSpark or in uniform. So just a couple more examples, I guess. I think I'll skip over this. It's pretty much the same types of things. But then talking about what the uniforms are, we have very strict branding requirements that we need to adhere to by AmeriCorps. So you'll see up on the screen, there are 2 pins that we provide fellows. That's really all they have to, that's their only uniform. So in AmeriCorps programs, you have to wear a polo or a vest or something every day. We just give the fellows 2 pins. So they need to wear them every day whenever they are logging any hours for AmeriCorps. Make sure they are wearing these pins. We have extras. If they lose them, that's fine. But it's really important that they are wearing these pins. Another rule of AmeriCorps is that AmeriCorps members cannot, under any circumstances, drink any alcohol while in uniform. That's one of the big things that we get reminded of all the time by AmeriCorps. So if you're going out to, if your fellow's going out to happy hour, they need to be taking those pins off. And we'll also be providing all of our fellows with signs that say AmeriCorps member serving here. They just have to have those in display either at their cubicle or at the front door of your office. So those are just a few reminders. We'll be talking to the fellows about this extensively at orientation, but just want to make sure that you are all aware of this as well. So then there are a few additional activities that fellows can't participate in as part of their service. And this comes up every single year even with returning partners, the admin work side of things. So I'm going to focus on that quickly. There are oftentimes a short-term person is in the office, and it's very easy for other staff members to come up and say, I'm really strapped for time. Do you mind just making a bunch of copies and printing them out for me for this event that I'm doing? A fellow can do admin work for their own event. Obviously, that's a part of all of our daily lives, but they can't be a general office assistant. They should not be sitting at the front desk of an office and answering phones or making copies for the office or running to get everyone coffee before meetings. If that's something that they would be doing as part of their project work, that's great. But general admin work is not allowed by AmeriCorps. So we'll be talking to fellows about this during the service year. Most of you are really keyed into all of this, but I want to ask you to talk to other folks in your office and make them aware of both the unawarded activities, prohibited activities, and then some of these limitations as well. That's most often where we hear from fellows that there are conflicts or issues when they are being asked by other staff members who might not know what a CivicSpark fellow is and what an AmeriCorps member is or is not allowed to do. So really just ask you, please have conversations with folks in your office and make sure everyone's aware of what your fellow can and can't be doing during the service year. I'll just touch on this quickly. Hopefully this isn't an issue, but as the the employers of the fellows, LGC handles any discipline or grievance procedures that need to happen. So what we ask you is if there is any issue or challenge or anything of concern that you have, tell your regional coordinator as soon as possible and really keep very careful documentation. Because we are not seeing these fellows every day, we're required to have a lot of documentation about any issues that come up just in case the issue does need to be escalated. You're going to be the one really detailing any issues that happen. So it's important that you're, keeping records of dates and times, emails, communications, anything that might be helpful to have in the case of a disciplinary process. It's very rare that that has to happen, so hopefully none of you will have to deal with that. But if necessary, we have to go through a corrective active process. We have that up on the screen, the different steps. We typically first have a verbal warning, and then if necessary, we'll escalate it to a written warning and professional development plan that the regional coordinator will be working very closely with the fellows on. So this, most likely you won't need to use. I think a bigger thing that we do want to ask our site supervisors for is if there are any other issues that come up that are not related to discipline that the program might need to know about, such as a mental health issue or your fellows having a crisis and you know that they're not doing well, please let us know. We have all the fellows are going to be getting access to the employee assistance program this year. There are different resources that we have and we can connect the fellow to, and it's really important that we know as much as we can about the fellow situation, particularly if issues are coming up. So I'll leave it at that. The takeaway is keep us in the loop. Please let us know what's going on so that we can just be keyed into any issues and act if necessary. So we'll take a quick break here, see if anybody has questions about any of the policies and procedures, and if not, we can move along. All right, no questions, so I'll try to blow through this next section here. So going to just talk about CivicSpark's process, how all the different documents and reporting pieces that your fellow are going to do fit in together. So at a high level, our model is we're recruiting fellows who are college grads with sustainability backgrounds, placing them in the field where they're going to engage with all of you, all of your agencies in the community to build capacity. And fellows do that through a 4-step process, starting with a gap assessment, then transitioning to their service project, working on volunteer engagement, and then creating a plan for transitioning expertise at the end of the service year. So the gap assessment is a really important part of the service year, and it takes place in the first 2 weeks of service. And what it is, if you're not familiar with it, is it's a standardized assessment instrument that the fellows are going to be using to set a number of goals on capacity building, on staff development, on volunteer engagement, and a few other topics. And they're going to be doing that based on the results of the pre-service capacity assessments that all of you are filling out right now. So it's really important that those are done before fellow orientation starts on September 10th, so that there isn't any delay in the fellows starting their term of service and creating their gap assessment. And these gap assessments, as I mentioned, are due 2 weeks into the project work. So that's Friday, September 9th. And what they're really used for, they're an opportunity to set measurable goals and refine their project scope. So really want to make sure that you are keyed into this process, asking your fellow about this. They're going to be interviewing the beneficiaries. They're going to be reading a bunch of documents. So it's important for our project partners to reach out to beneficiaries, let them know to expect a call or an email from fellows. A lot of partners make that connection themselves so that the fellow can reach out with that introduction already on the table. But really important that the fellows have hands-on support during this process, that these goals are achievable and reasonable. We want to make sure that makes sense in terms of your project. The fellows are going to be really new to this space, really trying to get their bearings while they're also doing this process. So make sure you're reviewing those goals, making sure that they're reasonable and on point. Because at the end of the service year, when the fellows reach back out, when you reach back out to your beneficiaries to complete the post-service capacity assessment, your beneficiaries are going to be reflecting on the gap assessment goals when they fill out that survey. So it's important that they're accurate. And we got a question about who exactly is a beneficiary. So a beneficiary, it needs to be a local government agency. And for a lot of our project partners, that is the agency itself. But you need to identify at least 2 beneficiaries per full-time fellow. And they are the folks who are going to be working closely with the fellows through the year, receiving the benefit, so to say, of the project work, and filling out these pre- and post-service capacity assessments. So KIF has sent all of you emails with information on selecting beneficiaries, filling out those surveys, and we have all the eligibility for our projects up on our website. So just make sure that your beneficiaries are eligible and in order to proceed. And there's a number of data points that we need to be collecting as well as part of that process. So if you didn't get that email from KIF with all that information on beneficiaries, just shoot me an email after the webinar and I can send that your way so that you can get everything squared away with beneficiaries. So as I mentioned, all fellows are going to be working on volunteer engagement projects. They have 150 hours to devote to that, and it's really used as a project management opportunity for fellows. So it's really tempting to want to just take those 150 hours and directly apply them to the project, but we really encourage you to be flexible with your fellows in terms of what they do during that time. If you have any ideas of how the fellow might be able to engage volunteers within the community, please share them with your fellow. You're going to have much stronger resources and networks than a lot of the fellows when they come in on day one. So connect your fellow to them, make sure they know the key community groups and folks to reach out to if they're doing volunteer engagement projects in your community. They have to have some connection to the local beneficiaries, which is why it is important that you're sharing any resources or networks that you have. And they're really varied. The projects can be individual, they can be in teams, and the regional coordinator is going to be working very closely with the fellow on that day-to-day project. So if you have any questions about what that entails, reach out to your regional coordinator and they can give you a great update on the whole volunteer engagement process. And then at the end of the year, fellows will be completing a transition of knowledge document. So for all of you, your fellows are already your current fellows are working on these now, and we will be sharing these transition guides with the incoming fellows that you're going to be having start in just a few weeks. If you haven't been engaged in the transition of knowledge development with your fellow, definitely reach out to them. We want to make sure that the knowledge that they are putting into these reports are useful for you and your agency and your beneficiaries. They're really great tools. The fellows are working on them they have been working on them for quite a while, and they need to be wrapped up before the end of service. So just encourage you to reach out, talk to your fellow about them so that we can make sure that they're useful for you in the long run. That's really what the goal of these items are. And then just mentioning again the beneficiary eligibility. So for the last question we just had, all local governments who are selected as beneficiaries need to lack one of the 3 following capacities. So a dedicated full-time sustainability or climate action staff person, a formally adopted climate action plan, or specific concrete mechanisms to track progress on your climate action. So obviously that third one is the most flexible. A lot of our beneficiaries have that as their primary eligibility criteria. But if you have any other specific questions about what that looks like, just let me know. So I want to talk a little bit about the professional development training that fellows are going to get throughout the course of the service year. We're trying to be much more open with this training program with our project partners this year. It sounded like last year some of you wanted to know a lot more. So we're going to be providing a training schedule to all of our fellows and partners right around orientation. And it's really a consistent training plan from September all the way through the end of July, beginning of August, when they wrap up their service year. Starts with orientation and then continues into 2 trainings a month for the rest of the service year. So at orientation, we're going to be covering AmeriCorps policies and procedures, volunteer recruitment and management, the politics and policy and science of climate change, as well as sector-specific breakouts as well. So for some of you who have very multidisciplinary projects and your fellows could potentially fall into a few different sectors, we're going to be reaching out to you in the next week or so that you can think about where you want your fellow to train on day 1 so that they can be involved in that sector at orientation. Beyond that, we're going to be doing cohort calls throughout the course of the service year where fellows working on similar projects can network, share best practices and any questions or concerns that they have about their work. So we want you to play a role in selecting where the fellows' efforts are going to be spent. So again, keep an eye out if you know you have a very interdisciplinary project. Somebody on staff will likely be reaching out to you to hear where you'd like your fellow to focus their time at orientation. The state seminars are typically the first week of the month. We do them statewide, so all the fellows across the state are going to be engaging directly, and they cover a wide range of sector topics, some more technical, some more soft skills. But as I mentioned, we're going to be giving you the total list of topics very soon. And then regional trainings are something that's going to take the fellows off-site for anywhere from a few hours to a half day or more. They're typically the 3rd week of the month, but that changes depending on availability of the cohort, and they're hosted in person by the regional coordinator. So it's really important that the fellows go to these. It's a great chance for them not only to learn and grow, but to network with the other fellows in the region, which is a very important part of the service year. So if you know your fellow has one of these trainings, please make it possible for them to go if you can. Unless there's a really major work conflict, we expect the fellows to be at all of these trainings. Again, they should be letting you know when they have to be off site and giving you plenty of a heads up for that. But this is a requirement of the program that they're going to these trainings, so we really want to make sure that they're there whenever possible. And then just going to show you quickly the program calendar. I mentioned the new start and end date of the program, and we're going to be giving you the calendar, all the checklists that are in this PowerPoint, as well as a bunch of other helpful resources in a new site supervisor handbook that we're creating now. So keep an eye out for that in the next couple of weeks. But here are the high-level dates of the program, as well as the holidays that we are required to give the fellows off. For the most part, these will align with the holidays that your agency has. But if for any reason these do not align with your organization's holidays, just have a conversation with your fellow about this. They're allowed to take these days off on the screen, but if they would prefer to take off the day when your office is closed, that's okay as well. We just really need to make sure that we're all communicating, so your regional coordinator, the fellow, and you all, the site supervisors, whenever the fellow is taking time off, we all need to be on the same page about vacation time and holidays. So make sure that before you approve any time, you talk to the regional coordinator, and likewise, the regional coordinator will make sure to touch base with you before any time is approved for time off by the fellow. So I haven't gotten any more questions, so I guess one question. Will you send us a written list of holidays and events? Yes, we will. The handbook that we're going to send you, we know you're all busy, so we're going to keep it pretty short. It should be about 10 pages or so with the most important dates that you need to know. So we'll be sending all of that information along to you fairly soon. So just for time, I'm going to jump right into project partner roles and responsibilities. Just keep sending questions through on the side if you have anything that comes up as we run through this. And I will definitely stop and answer them as they come along. So the first thing that I want to say, I don't think that this applies to most of you or maybe even any of you, but really important that we're referring to the CivicSpark fellows as fellows, not interns. We hear this every year that other folks in the office constantly refer to the fellows as interns, and we always get feedback that really irks them. So make sure folks know that your fellow is a fellow, not an intern. If they are getting business cards from your agency or a name placard on their cubicle, make sure it says fellow, not intern. I know it's a small thing, but it's really important to the fellows themselves. And I got another question about some of the dates that fellows are going to be off and out of the office for training. Somebody asked if we could get calendar invites for those. That's a great question. So we have in the past asked fellows to share calendar invites with their partners for any and all CivicSpark events, but I'll talk to our regional coordinators to see if they could just include you all sort of on their short list when they send out invitations and meeting holds. But that's a great question. Definitely would help if you're not getting those otherwise. So the primary role of our site supervisors is to provide support for fellows, project partners, and the program. So at this point, what we really need all of you to do, if you haven't already, is identify who on staff is going to be the primary point person for the fellow. Hopefully, if you're on the webinar today, that means that's you. But if you're not sure if you're going to be the primary point person, please let us know as soon as possible and pass any information that you get today onto that other person. There are going to be a lot of communications that we're going to be sending to site supervisors throughout the service year. Our regional coordinators are going to be meeting with them regularly, so want to make sure we have the most up-to-date contact information as soon as possible. And beyond that, I'm going to be asking you to do a lot of work with our reporting, sharing our impact numbers, and engaging with our completing the pre and post service capacity assessments. And then a big thing that I mentioned before is engaging in the professional development of the fellow. In a few slides, I have some information. There's some more that we're going to be asking of you this year. You've already been doing a wonderful job providing a really meaningful experience for our fellows, but we have been getting some feedback from California volunteers that they would like to see us engaging site supervisors even more in the professional development of our fellows. And I've heard from some of you that you would like to be playing an even bigger role as well. So we'll talk about what that looks like and how you can participate in that process as well. So ways to provide a meaningful experience for your fellow beyond professional development and networking opportunities is holding regular check-ins. Set an hour on the calendar. I know that you're all super busy, but put the time aside on day one and stick to it throughout the service year. Appreciate your fellow. I share the benefits that they're getting to give you a bit of a sense of what they are giving up to take part in this experience. So make sure you're thanking them for their work and for their service and sharing their successes whenever possible and keeping us informed if there are any issues or challenges or successes so that we can help or help celebrate whatever might be going on. And we also want to make sure that you are mentoring your fellows. A lot of our fellows are transitioning from college, and this is one of their first full-time work experiences, and that can definitely present challenges. So we want to nurture long-term leadership and make sure that the fellows are not only engaged in the work that your agency is doing, but they're also engaging in the projects and the program in a really meaningful way. So find opportunities to give feedback, give direction, and just be as engaged in the fellows' needs as possible. You've all done a wonderful job of that this year, so there's not too much to add other than keep it up. The fellows really, really appreciate it. And then another part of the site supervisor and project partner role is invoicing, everybody's favorite thing. So typically it's monthly unless otherwise arranged. We can set up pretty much whatever you'd like. Just let us know and we'll put you in touch with our accounting team to create a schedule for invoicing. And as you know, total project hours are tracked, but the invoices are not tied to them. So fellows are on the job for your project at all times, except when they're engaging in non-project activities like training, service days, and everything else. So if you need copies of fellow time cards for whatever reason for your own grant tracking or reporting, let us know. We can try to set up a way for either your fellow to directly share their time cards with you, or for us to share the complete list of time cards and the descriptions and categories that your fellows are logging on a regular basis. So just let us know if that's an issue, and we can definitely help you out there. So I want to talk before we wrap up about some of the things that we'd like you to start prepping for just in the next few weeks. So if you haven't signed your service agreements yet, please get those to us as soon as possible. Those really need to be signed and ready to go before your fellow comes on board. Identifying 2 local public agencies as beneficiaries per full-time fellow. So some of you on the webinar only have a half-time fellow this year and you're sharing with another project partner. In that case, you only need 1 beneficiary. And then also you need to figure out some of the office arrangements. So if there are any other background checks, if there are any employee benefits that the fellow might be qualifying for, and then getting them set up with any necessary workspace or office equipment, as well as an email login or server login if that's necessary for your agency. And we will, just as a note, be providing them all with CivicSpark email addresses that we will be communicating with them over primarily. But if they need to have an agency email for your office, that's completely fine. Just find some time in the next few weeks to set that up before they come on board. And some of the things we'd like for you to start preparing for the fellows now are some communication guidelines. It's every local government agency runs differently. So we want to make sure that the fellows are clear with what the internal dynamics of the workplace are. And I think also giving them some sense of what the office culture is. It's definitely different in every site. We talk to the fellows about coming to work, being professional on day one. How do you typically dress in a local government setting? But some of your offices are much more casual than others, and some of them are much more formal. So, preparing some sort of expectation sheet for the fellows about who they should be communicating with, what their dress should be, and things like that, going to be really helpful to give to the fellows on day one. And also prep any relevant project resources. So as I mentioned, your outgoing fellows will be doing transition of knowledge reports, but work with them to set up a folder or a physical folder or a folder on a drive or a USB with other relevant policies and training documents that you want to give to your fellows on day one. And also talk to them about the office location and directions for coming in on the first day if they didn't come in person. Every year we hear horror stories about brand new fellows taking an hour or 2 for them to find the office. So just send them directions, make sure they know what's going on, and also give them some sense of whether or not they should be driving or taking public transit and how parking works if that's an issue. And then, as I mentioned earlier, trying to set up some fellow interviews or discussions and meetings with the public beneficiary that you're selecting for them. So we're going to talk through 2 other checklists. So, and again, I'll be sharing this as part of your project partner onboarding handbook. But here's a list of things to think about before they get on board. Most of these we've talked about, but just think about whatever might be helpful for a new employee. If there is somebody in the HR department you need to chat with to get some of the information about your agency, get that done as soon as possible. And then this is a checklist for what we would like a orientation to look like for your fellow in the first 2 days. So making sure that you go over all of these items with them on day one. Something that, again, you might need to loop in an HR person for is making sure that the fellows know any site procedures or emergency action plans that exist. It's definitely, we have to require that, but obviously we're not on site, we can't do that. So we just ask you to coordinate with any office manager who might give that training, and then also give them any badges or anything if they need to get into the office. So I want to also give you a sense of what the first few weeks of the program are going to look like. We're going to be giving fellow site supervisor agreements to all of you so that you can sit down with your fellow and set some of those expectations around what their work schedule is going to look like. Do they have a 980 or a 410 schedule? Are they working, typical 9 to 5:30 or some other schedule? A key part of that is all fellows need to take at least a half-hour lunch break. So even if your office culture is people sit at their desk and work through lunch, because fellows are AmeriCorps members, they are required by AmeriCorps to take a half-hour lunch break at least. So tell them where the lunchroom is, tell them where the good spots are to eat lunch around the office so that they're taking that lunch break every single day. Setting the weekly check-ins is another part of that process, and then finding time to discuss the expectations and communication guidelines for your office. In the first 2 weeks, we'll also be asking you to work through the gap assessments with your fellows, and then really making sure that your capacity assessments are in good working order so that fellows can take those and really create these strong goals with that document. And they're really going to need hands-on support during that process. The first 2 weeks are going to require a little bit more of you all as project partners, but after that, it's really going to be worth it as they can jump into their project work with much more knowledge and background. And then within the first month, we're going to ask you all to complete fellow performance assessments. So this is new for 2017-18. We haven't asked project partners to do this before. But in doing my site visits earlier this year, I actually heard from a lot of you that this is a process that you wanted to engage with. We're going to be asking fellows to do self-assessments. They are going to sit down with you, with their regional coordinator, and discuss their own goals for the year. But we're also going to ask you to fill out a survey, which you will also discuss with your regional coordinator, that reflects on, in the first month to 6 weeks of the service year, what do you think of the fellows' performance in a number of key categories? You are going to see them much more in their day-to-day work. You're going to see how they're performing on an ongoing basis. And we typically involved the regional coordinators in this process, and they've been the one filling out the performance assessment. But I think this year, we're really excited to have this be collaborative between the RCs who are going to be actually doing the trainings, you all who are going to be supervising the fellows from day to day, and the fellows themselves. So more information is going to be coming out soon about what these assessments are going to look like and what the expectations are for you all, but just wanted to put that on your radar so that you know that they're coming. So the next steps from here, just make sure that you're keeping an eye on those emails coming from KIF. I know there are a lot of them and they are long, but please do read them and let me know if you have any questions. They have a lot of key information in them about what needs to happen before the start of the service year. Your regional coordinator will also likely be reaching out to you soon to talk about next steps. So find some time to talk to them to make sure everyone's on the same page about kickoff. And then prepare for the fellow orientation and get anything you need together to set up that training. And part of those materials that we're going to be giving you shortly are some sample agendas for an orientation. So then in just the last few minutes, I'm just going to go through a few slides before we wrap up. We've talked about the regional coordinator a lot. You know your regional coordinators. I think almost all of you are going to have the regional coordinators that you've worked with in the past. But they're a really key part of the CivicSpark team. They're doing a lot, both to provide mentorship and support to the fellows in the region, but also be a regional liaison for the program. So if you hear of other potential projects in the region, if you hear of folks who might be a good partner or a resource or a sponsor, let the regional coordinator know. There are physical presence in the region. They do a lot of different things on the program side and are going to be your primary resource throughout the service year. And then we all want you to use each other as a peer network as well. We heard from a lot of you during site visits this year that you'd like some sort of cohort call that's optional, but gives you the opportunity to talk to other project partners both within your region and within different topic areas. So encourage you to reach out to us if you want to be connected to anybody else. If you think somebody might be doing something similar, just ask us and we can obviously connect you to project partners, to their resources. We're a huge network at this point of fellows and partners, and we want to make sure that you are getting as much benefit from that as possible. So we'll share as many resources as possible with you, both from other project partners, from LGC's network, but always encourage you to ask us questions and reach out to us if you have any other questions. And then the last thing that I'll say is that we're on Facebook. A lot of you have been sharing links to Facebook through your own agency's Facebook page, and we really appreciate that. But if you want to keep up to date on our fellow program, like us on Facebook, great way to follow us on a day-to-day basis. And we also share a lot of resources over that page and successes. So if your fellow is in the news, let us know. We would love to brag about them and you over our Facebook page. So with that, I know we only have a few minutes left, but I'll hang out on the line to see if anybody has any questions. My contact information is also up on the screen, so just let me know if you have any other questions as we go through the startup process. But thank you so much for taking the time to join the webinar today. Really appreciate it and really excited to work with you all this coming service year. All right, so it doesn't look like we have too many questions, so I will end the webinar. But if you would like a copy of the slides, just shoot me an email after the webinar and I can send them your way. And in the meantime, just keep an eye out for some emails from us in the next couple of weeks. Thank you all.